But as ultimate proof of that, I'll show you something we just did, which I was going to say it was a world publishing first, but I'd have to give apologies to Moses, because we created a book with a stone cover, which this book we put out twice a year. It's a guide to creativity and the latest in cutting-edge creativity. Not the stars of today and everything from gastronomy to design to music, but we asked those people to tell us about the upcoming 5 or 6 hot talents, and we share that with the global Pernod team. It's a very interesting project and sort of the breadth of the kinds of things that we talk about. So is it a brave new world that we're landed into? I'm not sure about that. You know, we've all had the news not too long ago about who's listening in on our emails and our phone conversations, and apparently Barack Obama knows everything about you. I don't know why he'd want to know about us, but he apparently does. And he's friends with all these guys who are watching us. I love that little thing on top. Facebook helps confuse you and annoys the people in your life. To each of these trends, there's good and there's bad. The huge institutions that have been part of our life have been challenged. The things we take for granted, the greatness of the big banks, the masters of the universe, so on, these have all changed. So we can't behave as if they haven't. So it used to be a question mark, if you go back to the previous slides about the media choices we have. Are we living in a big world or a small world? Do we choose network or independent agencies? Do we have a local brand or a global brand? Geez, do we put our money in digital? Do we put our money in TV? What is it? So that's the kind of or world, sort of a sort of yes-no kind of choice situation. We don't think that's the world we're in. We think it's an and world. And you have to look on it that way. So there's a great study that I read religiously twice a year. It comes out from Kleiner Perkins. Again, not really known for trend watch and advertising. Kleiner Perkins is the most important venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. And they have some really interesting thoughts. I'm going to take you very briefly through some of that. But, you know, we take for granted what's just happened. Twitter, iPhone, iTunes were launched only a very short period of time ago. Facebook, 100 million just in the same year we launched. I wish I had those shares after all. Obviously, something we look at closely with Intel is the prevalence of movement from computers to smartphones and tablets and so on. But the speed with which this is happening is really extraordinary. I mean, if you have worked with cars or even fashion business, you know that your cycle is often 18 months, 2 years, 3 years out whenever you do something new. If you have a packaging, if you have a brand for which packaging is very important, if you want to change the smallest thing on the packaging, modernize it, contemporize it, whatever your plan is, it takes 2 years to roll that out. Just in the last 2 years or 3 years, what's happened? Smartphones and tablets are selling faster than PCs. In 2012, Encyclopedia, a brand that had been around for I think 130 years or 140 years, died because of Wikipedia. I mean, just pause for a moment to say, oh my God, this is the world we're living in. And this year, the total installed base, you would have thought, we've had personal computers since the 80s. You would have thought the installed base of personal computers would be a lot more than that, but no. Tablets and smartphones have surpassed sometime in the course of this year. And this matters for brands. It matters for advertising, and it matters in some profound ways. So, Kleiner Perkins report comes out twice a year. Get it if you don't have it. Mary Meeker, I think, is the author. She was a very interesting lady. In the middle of her lengthy 200-page analysis of where technology is going, she talks about this, and she comes to certain basic conclusions that these changes, powered by the new devices I just talked about, come down to 3 issues. User interface, how we act. Let's face it, it's just a hell of a lot easier to use this stuff than it used to be. Connectivity, you can get whatever it is you want, wherever you want, whenever you want. They are connected to each other, and soon, by the way, if you track these things, not just the chips that Nike have put in your shoe, but your clothing will have chips in it and other things as well. Your appliances at home. All of this will be connected absolutely because the pricing of this has fallen so much. But the word that intrigued me and intrigued us was the word beauty. It's not something you normally see in a sort of technical analyst report. But these three things, user interface, connectivity, and beauty, are what are making the difference today. It's how beautiful things are that determines their success. And we think how beautiful stories are. So, what's combined to make this meaningful is bandwidth. One of the great things about being an advertiser, one of the fun things still today, despite the challenges of the last 3 or 4 years that we've seen, and all of us are living through, particularly in Europe, is you get exposed to a lot of different brand problems. About a decade ago, I launched a global brand for Sprint, the telecom company, the American telecom company. And we launched their global IP network, which isn't very sexy compared to sneakers and other things, but actually it's essential. And the problem with that was, if you can imagine what they were selling, which was data passage, was selling for, I don't know, 100 units, 100 euros, $100, whatever. The year we launched it, within 12 months, the price of what they were selling fell by a factor of 10. So the economics were destroyed by their very own success, by laying the fiber optic cables around the world that we now benefit from, all of us. So bandwidth is critical, it's everywhere, and most importantly, it's almost free. It's getting to free. So the next time you're sitting in your boardroom with the CFO or the finance director, we're going to come back to this point, and you're trying to justify creating this kind of campaign and discussing it. This kind of understanding, your ability to have a conversation, a connection, a communication, a relationship, the cost of that has dramatically been reduced just in the last 2 or 3 years. I might add, not necessarily if I'm roaming from Holland to Spain with my mobile phone, but nevertheless. The wireless, as we talked about, it's everywhere, and the evolution, the increasing evolution of the mobile and tablet forms. And just, a little film you might have seen, but it's just about a year ago, about how this is changing life. Yeah, so anybody with kids at home will know that when you sit down to watch television or you're watching a football match, you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, that one's in the iPad, that one's got the mobile phone, that one's got the laptop, my wife's got the laptop. It's the digital campfire is expressing itself in different ways. And so understanding how profoundly that's changing our behavior is something we take for granted, but we're talking about the last 3, 4, 5 years, not the last 50 years. And so it's not surprising that companies and brands who take 2 or 3 or 4 years to launch a product and perfect it might be a little bit behind the curve when it comes to taking this on. So the other thing that I was interested in is why aren't there more, given what's possible now, why aren't there more global brands? And you know, I think the key point there is that operating globally is not actually the same thing as being a global brand. This guy's an interesting guy from Procter & Gamble, used to run all their advertising. He says that, and I don't normally put up this many words on a slide, but that companies often confuse the strategy of operating globally with the concept of global brands. Basically, he's saying that if you've got enough money, you can ship yourself around the world and sell stuff theoretically anywhere to anyone. But achieving a meaningful brand, that's a whole different thing. But these guys, they've had 50, 100 years head start on the rest of us. So, you know, we've made a specialty of working with companies to understand how to work across many different markets, how to address cultural issues, linguistic issues in a strategic way. It's difficult. It's not so easy. That's why not everybody does it. But your situation before was that your local distribution and the local media environment led to a lot of fragmentation and cost duplication. Another guy who's a good friend of mine who's on my board, Tom Harrington, used to run Adidas and took it over when it was almost bankrupt in the early 90s. I mean, let's remember that for a second. Adi was 3 days away from bankruptcy. And one of the reasons for that was they had allowed their brand to be interpreted completely differently by the sales channels around the world. So the Adi in Portugal was actually a different brand than the one here in Spain. And on and on and on around the world. So that is a huge cost, a huge inefficiency. And all of that, though, creates these very high barriers for new brands. But even for existing brands that maybe have to be refreshed. Here's a brand which I got to know quite well last year. I attended a seminar on the future of marketing hosted by Angela Ahrens, who has revived from nothing the Burberry brand together with her team. And they have some really, what's happening with Burberry, again, let's remember it, a brand that's in all the hit places now, but not that long ago was really on its last legs, was almost dead. They had something interesting, and if you have a chance, you must go to their new store on Regent Street in London. It's incredible. It's no longer possible to think of physical and digital as two different worlds. You have to create a consistent experience however and whenever the customer touches your brand. The lines are forever blurred. And this store is amazing. If you hold up a garment in front of the mirror is smart enough and wired into the garment to be able to tell you stories about that garment, where it comes from, what it's made of, etc., as you're considering whether or not you should buy it. The entire experience is really fresh, it's incredible. But they see themselves and their retail as being the physical embodiment of the digital Burberry world, not the other way around. That's a really interesting way of looking at things today, considering that's, again, a very old-fashioned brand. And yet, they know that the visitors who come and fly in, increasingly from China, from Russia, from elsewhere, that visit their key stores around the world, they may be in LA and they may go to a shop, but they may actually do their purchasing when they're back in Chengdu or Shanghai, online, click, click. So it's a different way of looking at the world. Because no matter who you are, and we believe still is going to be a very great role for strong local brands. It's not this either or, as I said before, but this is the world we're in, and here's a few ways that we address these challenges. So I'm going to show you two extremes just to be, I showed you Burberry, a famous name, yes, but one with big problems. This is the heritage brand of the ASICS sports company. Mr. Onitsuka founded that company, and this brand had fallen out of favor. It was basically moribund. It had been left to go. It was actually a huge star going back to Mexico '68 and other places. But we had to find a way to reinvent that, and we didn't have the money of the big sports brands. We didn't have Nike's money or Adidas money. We couldn't put hip-hop stars in our ads and whatnot, so we had to find a different way to protect this brand. And so over a number of years, we developed what we called the Made of Japan strategy that went to the authenticity of the story, that went to the heart of the differentiation between them and the others, and that captured something about the soul of Japan. And here's a few of the iterations of that we made, but I'll show you this short case study about 2 minutes long, which won a lot of awards.
Tansu, delicately ornamented, intricately handcrafted chests and cabinets that originated in the late 16th century Japan. 400 years on, this ancient craft was ready to be reinterpreted for a new generation by Onitsuka Taiga to carve a unique path for the iconic Japanese sneaker brand through the forest of Big Spend giants. It took Niigata-based Japanese woodshop Ogura Tansu Ten 4 months to build the elaborate piece by hand using the traditional methods. Over 1,200 stills turn the sneaker into an interactive wooden world full of discoveries, with custom designed compartments by artists and designers, and a handmade miniature workshop. Site visitors could discover the fascinating story of the sneaker's creation and the compartments where the inspiration behind new collections came to life. Rather than something to look at, we created something to be explored. Intriguing packages with keys were sent to influential bloggers, letting them unlock and explore certain compartments before anyone else. A new discovery waited behind each door. Total traffic to onitsukataiga.com increased 460%, referral traffic jumped 152%, and unique visitors grew by 125%. The story spread around the world, appearing in hundreds of blog posts, tweets, and magazines.